Welcome to Life Planning 101, brought to you by Kennedy Financial Services of Eastland. Tune in every Monday morning at 8:30 on KATX and KWBY, and again on Saturday morning at 9 on KATX and KWBY as Angela Robinson joins Terry Slavens to share important financial information to help you live life on purpose. Insurance, investments, estate and tax planning, and much more. All covered now on Life Planning 101.
And welcome into Life Planning 101 on this last Monday of August.
We have a great show lined out. Not only do we have our CFA on that's going to be talking about where the market is at and what's going on with it, but also we're going to be sharing money ideas that no one thinks is possible, and you don't want to miss that at the end of the show. But we are going to take it with further delay. Mr. Aaron Kennedy with Kennedy Financial Services, tell us what in the world is going on with, well, what should we say, Cohen and Korea, and is there any other C words that are driving the news like crazy in the markets the same way?
That's a great question. Good morning, everybody. I'm sure if you've been looking at the news, you know how horrible everything is right now. You know, just every piece of negative news that comes out, you know, you just think everything is falling apart. And, it's just so negative. And you know, what's really driving the market is this news. You know, even the big trade conflicts that have been working out for us, you know, it's driving volatility and it's not fun. But, you know, as bad as the media is telling us everything is, we're having a wonderful year. You know, tech companies are up double digits for the year. Small companies are up double digits. The S&P's doing wonderful. You know, earnings just came out, or we're about 91% through our earnings, and 79% of all companies surprised upwards.
Wow.
They had upward surprises. 72% in sales. So that's not bad.
No, because that means that's the economic engine moving there if it sells.
And those are record numbers.
Wow.
Record numbers. You know, we're doing wonderful. If you really want to get a good pace of what our country's doing, then you look at smaller companies that have most of their business inside the U.S., and they're more optimistic than they've been in 20 years.
Wow.
You know, we are 1 point away from the all-time high that was in 1983. That's pretty horrible, huh?
Yeah, that is bad news. I don't know how we're going to deal with that.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And, you know, this report that came out, it shows us where small companies are spending. You know, most of the time you see a lot of tax plays, what they're doing, a lot of depreciating goods, vehicles, office supplies. But that's not where they're spending money right now. They're building facilities, they're buying land. You know, because
they have the freedom to do so without having to worry about the tax deduction.
That's right.
Okay, yeah.
That's right. And this is the first time that their largest concern was not regulation or taxes. Mm-hmm. And guess what? They've decided to grow. More horrible news. Yeah. My gosh, why isn't this out there? You know, so, you know, we always preach of doing what's right, getting your risk right, and turning off the news. And that's what we need to do. I think the last time I was in here, we were talking about defensive stocks and how beat up they were. And there's still some great opportunities out there other than these big growth names. And that tide might be turning because last month, defensive stocks was up over 4%. Those same names that I came in and said, this is where the value is right now. 4%. And the cyclical sectors were down about 0.5% or so. So there's still great opportunities out there. Companies are growing like crazy. You know, the CFA Institute was doing some research, and they just came out and said that right now there's the largest discrepancy between growth stocks and value stocks ever. You know, so where do you want to be?
You know, it's interesting because, and this goes back to the news, even the headlines in the financial world, you know, and of course we read a lot what retailers read because we're curious, you know, how is the public being affected? And everything lately has been, everything's overpriced. What do you do now? Everything is at market highs. What do you do now? And, from what you're seeing and what you're saying is that that's really not the case as it has been when bubbles have burst in the past. Is that right?
We're not there. As of right now, the forward PE's at 16.8, I think.
Oh, wow.
That's pretty close. And the short-term average is 16.2. So, we're not that far off. Of course, you have some Netflix and some other companies like that are just astronomical. But there's a lot of great companies out there that are pretty low. Apple, they're even selling for cheap, compared to what the market is.
Right.
So there is some big growth names out there that are pretty reasonably priced.
I'm curious, the tariffs that are going on, obviously, and you've mentioned Ford, and that's, of course, what hit a heartstring because they've got, a lot of work in China that they do. And here we are potentially in this trade war that could break out at any minute. It's already kind of started. There's been some back and forth. But how much real effect do you think that the markets have left to price that in, or have they already priced it in?
That's a good question. They're pricing it in as we go. It's every single news. It's either priced in one way or the other. China just came back and said, hey, we need to come back to the table and fix this. Because who's going to get hurt? We have a pretty large trade deficit with China. That means we're buying more goods from them than they are for us. So it's going to hurt them a lot more than it hurts us.
So they're going to come to realization.
They're going to come to realization. Mexico came out this morning and said, hey, we're almost there. We got the NAFTA. NAFTA's getting done. And, it was painful to go through this, but what's it, 6 months? Stuff is getting done quickly.
Right.
And all we want is a fair shake.
And if Mexico gets on board, you got to believe Canada's going to be right next.
Absolutely.
On the right soon.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Europe came to the table, and we worked out good deals with them. Mexico should be any day. Hopefully we get something done with China, and it's going to reshape the entire trading landscape across the globe, which is a very positive thing.
You talked about the small cap companies, and we've got these big companies, and 6 months is a blip in a radar for a large cap company, a Ford, or something like that. But these small caps that deal primarily exclusively here in the U.S. and talking about the steel tariffs or things like that. How bad are these guys going to be affected by this, or does that really just create a buying opportunity to be looking for?
Well, okay, so tariffs and everything else, we are going to actually increase our prices. So our small companies are going to make more off their steel by the 30% tariffs or whatever else is out there. So it actually helps the smaller companies. What it hurts is the consumer. We are having to spend $30 or 30% more for that steel. And that's going to creep into our inflation numbers. So if we take any component and increase prices, or cost, it's going to trickle down to us as a consumer.
So all this hoopla about these companies getting hurt and that, all this, it's really us. It's how we feel with our pocketbook, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's more of inflationary pressures.
Yeah, well, very interesting. Very, very awesome information this morning. And I think you said it best, getting your risk right is the primary thing. Pulling all your cards off the table at any one time is one of the most dangerous things people can do. And, we get that question often right now just because the markets are so overpriced. And it's very, very important that you have somebody that you're working with that has a proactive, process to be able to help you determine your risk, determine that, what fits your situation for your future, not your neighbors, but your future, so that, you got everything in line. And, when the time comes that we have a recession, you're okay.
You're okay. That's right.
Yeah.
Stay disciplined. Get your risk right.
Yep. With that, thank you for Aaron for being on the show today. And when we come back, money ideas no one thinks possible.
Segment 2, Life Planning 101.
Yes, that's right. And money ideas no one thinks is possible. That's what you get to hear all about on the next 2 segments of the show. You don't want to miss it. So where did this come from? And, a couple weeks ago, I mentioned that we're actually in our 10th year of publishing articles. And so what we kind of thought would be fun is to pick out some of the best money things that we've actually done. Where everybody knows we're a life planning firm, and a lot of times we talk about planning and planning and planning. And this is planning. It takes planning to do it. But the center focus of these ideas is really about the money itself. So I want to go back to a parable first before I get started with these that we had shared earlier in the year. And it was about a giant ship engine that just suddenly quit working. And so, the owners of the company kept hiring people. They spent countless hours on that engine, working on it, and nothing was getting done. No one could get that engine to work at all. And then this old man came along. And he came in and they said, okay, well, go ahead. No one's been able to get it working, but maybe you can get it working and, maybe not. And they're kind of laughing behind the scenes. And he sits there and he inspects it for quite a while and looks at it and thinks about it and analyzes what's going on. And then he reaches in his little bag and he pulls out a little rubber hammer and he taps it. And immediately it cranks up. So he sends him a bill for $10,000. And they're outraged. They think all he did was just sit there and look at the engine and he didn't, analyze it. And it took him 10 minutes and he tapped on it and that was it. That's all it took him. How did that be $10,000? So they asked the man to itemize it. So he sent back a bill and it actually read it out. It said, tapping with a hammer, $2. Knowing where to tap, $9,998. And so, but isn't that the truth, right? Mm. And I always think that that's a perfect analogy of why we have a job, because a lot of times, you may go to professionals and get little things that you think are getting fixed, but in the end, you have a disaster. And I always go back to a story that a gentleman we tried to start working with in the 90s, 1992 was the first time we tried to start working with him. He actually came through one of our classes we did through the university, and we followed up with him. And no, I'm too busy. No, I'm too busy. Kept following up with him. Well, he finally sold his business. Came to us after he sold his business. And granted, this is 2018. So we're talking about somebody that we've been trying to get to work with us for 26 years, right? Finally came to us. Well, he made unfortunately, I say he made, his professionals did not advise him right to make the right decisions when he sold the business, and he's going to be subject to double taxation on that sale, and it's going to end up costing his family about 60 to 70%. And unfortunately, there's very little ways out of that. And it wasn't because he didn't have a good CPA or a good attorney or whatever, but he didn't have anybody that knew where to tap. And, how often does that happen? And we see that all the time. So we thought, okay, well, let's just come up with some of the things that, we've actually been able to help people do that other professionals or other people don't even think are possible. They don't even know how to do. In fact, they say that's impossible. How do you do it? Or Aaron or I end up on the phone with the CPA having to explain, okay, this is why it works, blah, 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 blah. And then they say, oh, okay. And it's no fault to a CPA, which is usually, and I bring up CPAs a lot because that's usually the trusted professional for most people, especially business owners. Agreed?
Sure.
And it's no fault to them, but do they plan? Is that what a CPA is built to do?
No.
No, they prepare. Okay? There's a difference between plan and prepare.
Big difference.
Big difference. Prepare, they are plan, you're sitting there, you're looking, you're forecasting, you're trying to think of ways to not pay tax, right? And preparing, they're just taking all the document that comes in and putting it into a form. And that's why I think a lot of people get frustrated, because they say, yeah, well, my CPA told me had I done it this way, this way, this way, I could have paid less in taxes. And I said, well, why didn't you tell me that ahead of time? Well, they didn't do that ahead of time because they don't plan for you ahead of time. So it's a big difference, right? And that's what we see all the time. So, just to get you through these, we're going to go in descending order. So we picked number 5, and number 5's vote was, let us show you how to keep your tax bracket below 10% in retirement. We literally have retirees that are spending over $200,000 a year that are paying none to very little, especially way below that 12% tax bracket in retirement. Is that amazing?
That's awesome.
It is amazing. But it can be done. People say, well, I don't know how you're doing that. Well, there's knowing where to tap the hammer. This is how we're doing that, right? Number 4, let us show you how to be like a Rockefeller. Has anyone ever noticed that the Rockefellers just keep getting wealthier and wealthier? I mean,
All the time.
every generation. How does that happen? Well, there's a secret that they have, and we know it. We got asked one time by a family. They said, okay, we know this can happen, that where you can build wealth and continue to build wealth with each generation, despite dysfunctional kids or grandkids, or, that shirt sleeves to shirt sleeve scenario in 3 generations with a business owner. And how can you do that? But not only do that, protect the wealth and not let it destroy the family. Well, knowing where to tap the hammer. When we come back, there's 3 more of these money ideas that no one thinks are possible you don't want to miss.
Final segment already, Life Planning 101. Angela, let's get right to it.
That's right. So how do you do that? These are questions that we get all the time when we say something like, let us show you how to keep your tax bracket below 10%. How do you do that? It's a common question, and that it goes back to that. Could be a game
show.
Yeah, it could be a game show. That's right. As a life planning firm, we truly are financial quarterbacks for families that we work with, and our job is knowing where to tap that hammer, like we talked about in that parable. And you know this, Terry, because you're always dealing with our schedule, but we spend tens of thousands of dollars each year to continue our education. We're constantly reading. That's why we've got specialists inside the firm, such as Aaron, that, focuses just on the investments themselves, and we're continuing that growth. And, the world is an ever-changing, it's an ever-changing pot. I was talking to somebody this week, and I said, yeah, I was up at 5 o'clock this morning on Sunday, and they said, what? I said, well, you just got to keep reading, because you get behind if you don't. Sure. That's what happens. And, we spend even more money retaining access to the very best specialists like attorneys and CPAs that we don't have inside of our firm. And we do it because we know we can't do the job alone. We know enough to be able to quarterback and to be dangerous and to ask the right questions and to keep learning to find, I love when someone says there's no way to do this. You know what that tells me? Let's find a way to do this. Right?
Challenge.
It's a challenge. It's a challenge, yes. And, we start calling, we start finding people to talk to and say, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? And we find that hole to be able to, so-called thread that needle through. And it's extremely important that people have someone on their side to be able to do that. And here's just a few more examples. So these are the last 3 money ideas no one thinks is possible. Number 3, let us show you how to protect your financial legacy from divorces that may occur over the next 100 years.
Wow.
One of the biggest threats we have today to our money is what? A divorce rate, 40 to 50% in this country. Isn't that nuts? And people really don't think about that. That's the last thing they really plan around until they have a sudden worry in their family that might actually occur, right? And they get nervous about it. And then, the sad thing is we find that most people don't plan for that at all. So that shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations doesn't mean just a business owner that transfers his business down 2 generations and it's gone or it's not doing well. It also means just the financial legacy is gone. Your grandkids may never see a penny because of divorces. In fact, it may go to the spouse that wasn't in the family, their new spouse's children that you never knew.
Right.
Would you be okay with that?
No.
Okay. So, how do you protect that for 100 years? We know a way. Number 2, let us show you, this is one of my favorites, how to make your IRA disappear and reappear tax-free to your children. We talked about so many times this year this tax ticking bomb that's out there. And IRAs are a big culprit of that, because if you understand the dynamics of your 401k or your IRA, every time you take $1 out of that, you pay tax on that. And then when your kids inherit it, guess what they have to do? Pay tax on that. And we find that a lot of people, and we have many of them, retire with $1 million, $2 million, $3 million 401ks. They may never use it all. They may never use any of it. And what have they left their kids?
A tax burden.
A tax burden, right? So what if you could turn that into tax-free money for your children?
I would see, why would you not do that?
Why would you not ask? Why would you not ask? Where do I tap for that one? Let's figure that one out. How do we do it, right?
$9,998 worth.
That's exactly right. That's
money well spent. Right
money
there.
well spent. And before I get to this last one, I want to remind everybody, obviously, these are like, do not try these at home. Do not try these on your own. You need to even find out if they're right for your situation, because we have our pyramid. Are we okay? Are you okay? Is your community okay? You got to take care of yourself first. So some of these
milking stool. It has to be good for everybody.
That's right. It's got to be perfect for your situation, and you need to have somebody that can analyze it, because just doing something, you may really rock the rest of your boat too. Right? But let's get to number one, because this is my favorite. Let us show you how to pay 0 estate tax. We can show anyone how to pay 0 estate tax.
Regardless of the size of the estate.
Regardless of the size of the estate. Many advisors know how to lower the estate tax or pay for it using life insurance. So you say, because I guarantee if we have somebody listening to the show today, it's an advisor, they're saying, oh, well, I know what she's talking about. You just take this and you pay for it with life insurance. No. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about paying none, paying 0. Let me ask you this. Who would you rather pay your money to? Your kids and the causes that you care about most, or Uncle Sam?
Kids.
Yeah, absolutely, right?
Every day.
So you got a choice, and that's the big thing. So just ask, where do I tap that hammer, right? And so we have a Twitter poll out there today at KFS Life Planning. Does your advisor know where to tap the hammer? Yes or no? You got 5 examples. It's a good question, because in reality, your advisor may not really be an advisor. They may be a solution product analysis. And that's a lot of times an analyst. And that's what we see a lot of times out there, is that, an insurance agent, and I'm an insurance agent, okay, but an insurance agent, guess what their number one solution is all the time?
Life insurance.
Life insurance or annuities, right? Bankers, bank product, right? Investment advisors, guess what? Investments. So you've got to have someone that is really a holistic planner, that quarterback for you, that really knows where to tap that hammer. Very important. With that, my name is Angela Robinson with Kennedy Financial Services, Aaron Kennedy with Kennedy Financial Services here in Eastland, Texas. God bless everyone. Have a great week.
Thank you for joining us for Life Planning 101, brought to you by Kennedy Financial Services of Eastland. Tune in every Monday morning at 8:30 on KATX and KWBY, and again on Saturday morning at 9 o'clock on KATX and KWBY for more Life Planning 101.
Advisory services offered through Smart Money Group, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Securities offered through Calton & Associates Incorporated, member FINRA SIPC. Kennedy Financial Services Incorporated is an independent of Calton & Associates Incorporated and Smart Money Group, LLC.